There are the gatekeepers. They're programming it to try to keep it from being antisocial or hateful. But as AI advances, I think that those protections are going to prove to be inadequate in the face of financial pressures. Again, we can use social media as an analogy and see that there's all these financial pressures for them to make it as raunchy and hateful as possible. And that's a problem we haven't solved yet, but solve it we must, and I think solve it we will. And that same level of maturing up as a society to protect ourselves, just like automobiles. So it was a free-for-all at the beginning, and eventually we had safety mechanisms and guardrails and traffic engineering, and that hasn't solved the problem, but it's mitigated it. And we're going to have to work similarly to mitigate the negative effects of the information age as we go forward as a society. The idea of safety and alignment, that is, at least ostensibly, an important goal or policy of the AI companies, but we'd be crazy to trust them and just assume that they'll be, it'll all be benign and that all of these incentives and bad actors that are among the good folks who are working on this pose a threat, right? So it's definitely threatening. Anything new and powerful is going to threaten us. And we may have to experience some significant damage before we get smarter about it or organize ourselves politically and legally in a way that can effectively mitigate the harms. But the idea that it's, first of all, within culture in general, and especially within progressive postmodern culture, which is a kind of a dominant belief system or worldview in Silicon Valley, and much of the tech world, much of the highly educated people embrace that frame of values, that one of the characteristics of that culture, and then, this is a bigger philosophical discussion about the telos of antithesis of progressive postmodernism, but the idea that doom is nigh, right? We're not just in a climate crisis. The collapse is imminent, right? In other words, it's like catnip. They love that. They love doomsday scenarios and prophecies of doom. It just feeds in to a very deep psychological level of desire to see a collapse, even though many postmodernists won't admit that drive of antithesis, thanatos, as the death wish, as Freud called it. This is a strong psychological current amidst other important currents within progressive postmodernism that are entirely positive and care about humans at a new level. So I'm not just trying to say it's all bad. But this hunger for doomsaying that is a cultural characteristic of much of the culture of AI and the concentric circles out there, they love this. They can't help but embrace it. You can see how the doomsayers have been celebrated and they get on all the podcasts because there's a big audience for anybody who's going to come along and say, we're totally screwed. And that's not just the case with progressive postmodernists. That's been like the traffic accident that you have to slow down and look at. That's been a feature of human consciousness, part of revolutionary psychology in a way. So doomsaying is strong, and many folks want to believe it for all kinds of reasons, both subconscious and conscious. But I think that doomsaying is fatalistic. It disempowers us. It even infantilizes us into thinking that it's inevitable. Right? I know smart people who are saying, well, humanity's doomed. It's a foregone conclusion. There was a big culture into the dark web and the poetry, and there's this kind of embracing of it that the AI predictions feed directly into. And ultimately, I think the idea that AI is going to destroy our society, albeit risks, albeit threats, I think it's ultimately kind of a science fiction fantasy.